do we got going on today? What? It's Friday the 13th? A week before my birthday? It's gonna be a great day. There's only one thing to do. Come here, you sexy bitch. Oh yeah. Time to sit back, watch a movie with my Corona pillow, get all comfy. Let's start this shit. What the fuck is this shit? This is close enough. This'll do. Welcome to Destination Station. Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. I felt the need to do a video today. Actually already shot the video, but everything kind of got lost. But I'm redoing it. This is Friday the 13th. I felt like this was a good day to explain why the love of horror films. Why do horror fans and people in general just enjoy horror films? I mean, there's a question why do we like tragic things to happen to people? See these horrific situations and terrifying situations and things that happen to people, like death and destruction and all that kind of stuff. Dan from Reject Films made a video recently, and the video really intrigued me and got me to thinking. And my wife has always asked me, why do you like horror movies so much? Why do you like to see people die and all that kind of stuff? And it's not necessarily I like to see people die. I really look at it as anything else. I look at it as like, why does people like to watch action films? It's a fantasy. It's a sense of adventure. You see a good guy come out of an outcome of a situation and kill all the bad guys. Like let's say Die Hard, Bruce Willis, he's killing everybody and taking names, and you see Sylvester Stallone movies, you see Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and True Lies, people getting their heads blown off, and it's got a lot of violence and action and stuff like that, but they always save the day, kill all the bad guys, and get the girl some way, shape, or form, and they just walk away. With horror films, it's kind of in that same fantasy realm for me anyways. I'm going to try to explain in this video. I pulled some movies from the shelf and try to break down different subgenres of horror and why I like them and what gets my adrenaline going and everything like that. So just sit back, enjoy this video. I hope y'all like the intro. I'll leave this the description of Reject Films in the description down below. I'll leave his link down below so you can go follow him. Very great video, and I hope other BlueTubers, I hope y'all do it as well, because this is a great topic, especially for today, for Friday the 13th. So basically, I wrote down some notes. I got some movies and stuff like that. Like I already mentioned, it's the sense of adventure, the thrill of the situation. Just like any action movie, you put yourself in a situation and you are trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. You always think, like, when you watch these movies, like, if I was in that situation, how would I get out of it? How would I survive, fight for survival? We watch these protagonists and we're on the ride with them trying to get out of the situation. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't, and that's all the fun about it. But there's different levels of fun, there's different levels of horror, and we're going to go through them right now. Another thing, it's just a fantasy like any other thing, like an action movie, a video game. Why do we play these video games? And that we're kind of like on an adventure. We're playing, we're killing people, but it's a fun story. It's creative, and it's just It's not that we enjoy the kill, we enjoy killing people or anything like that. That's if it was just killing and didn't have any meaning behind it, or a good scenario or story or something, I think it would all just fall flat. I really believe that creativity of a horror icon or a situation, a premise, much like Final Destination, it's very creative. You know, you cheating death and death coming after you. That's fun. It's a very fun premise. It's very creative. Kind of gets your imagination rolling. But you know, like later on in the further sequels, you know, they kind of glorified the kills more than they did focus on the story. One thing I wish they would do in that franchise was keep the death aspect in it. I don't know if you remember in the first film, every time someone was about to die, there was like this shadowy figure coming across the floor or the ground, a mirror, something that like gave you the it made you think that death was near and he was about to take someone out. I thought that was a very cool take. Kind of reminded me of the Frighteners a little bit. But in the further sequels, they did away with that and they just glorified the kills, which some of them were very effective, but it kind of got comedic as they went, and you didn't really care about the characters and stuff. The first one's definitely the best one, but that's one creative horror premise that's very creative that I can get behind of. A horror icon would be, I would say one of the best horror icons, that creative horror icons, is Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. I really think that his character is probably one of the best horror icons ever in cinema history. He has more personality. He actually talks more than, you know, most horror icons. I mean, you really got Freddy, Jason, and Michael. Those are the three baddies. Those are the three main horror icons. You could say Chucky and stuff like that. Chucky is too. You got a number of them, but Freddy really just, I really think, in my opinion, he brings it all. And then you got the mind of Wes Craven that came up with this whole scenario of killing people in your dreams. Has a fantasy realm to it. Has a pretty good backstory to it. It's a fun film, especially the first one. There's a few entries I could do without. But yeah, not like Michael and Jason and all them. They're silent killers. There's just someone behind a mask. But with Freddy, that's why it's going to be very hard to replace Robert Englund, because how do you replace such an iconic character, iconic role? Because Robert Englund really brought it. And I know Jackie Earle Haley tried in the remake, and I think he did okay for what it was, but the movie kind of fell apart. Some of the things that he did fell apart too. There's more cons than pros that I liked about the remake. So, but yeah, Friday. This is A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the better creative horror icons and horror franchises. The next one, I know it was a book and it was a miniseries, but look at it, Pennywise, one of the better creative horror icons on screen. I mean, this movie is amazing. The miniseries is good. Tim Curry did great as the character. I never read the book. I'm not even going to start acting like I have, but yeah, so this is, I mean, you got this good story of a coming of age story, kind of like you're following these group of kids, kind of like The Goonies or Stand By Me, but it has a horror twist on it. I mean, take Pennywise out of it, it's still a good movie. It had good acting, good story, good drama, good comedy. Some of the jump scares worked, some of them didn't, but then you throw Pennywise in there and it's just, you're in for a really good treat, and I can't wait for Chapter 2. Another thing about horror films is the fight for survival. You look at our protagonists in these films and you're like, how are they going to get out of this situation, this bizarre situation? What, you place yourself in their shoes and you're like, what would I do in this situation? How would I get out? And you know, the prime example is of a horror film that does a little bit of everything besides comedy. It doesn't really have too much comedy. Is this Descent and the Descent and the Descent 2, especially the Descent. You put these characters. It's got horror, it's got action, it's got adventure, and it's got just tension all the way through this film. Take the creatures out of this movie from the cave, and it's claustrophobic. You're like on the edge of your seat the entire time while watching this film, and it's like you're almost like holding your own breath in. You know, it's scary. It's a scary situation, and then you throw creatures into it. It just takes it over I mean, it's 10 plus after that, and it's just badass. It has badass action and gore in it, and it's just a really, really good, effective horror film. And I know this one picks up like directly after the first one, but I think they had like a different ending for the first one. So I don't remember which ending they decided to go with on the second film. But yeah, if you haven't seen The Descent, very good horror films you should check out, survival horror films. Another one is, I mean, isn't the greatest franchise, but Saw. You put yourself in this, it's like a psychological horror, but it's also like torture porn. It gets more like that later on in the sequels, but like you can say that Jigsaw doesn't even kill anybody. He more tests his victims, and they basically kill themselves by the choices that they make. But in the first one, if you don't recall, a shotgun did kill like the Asian cop. So I guess I really kind of see that Jigsaw was more of a slasher in the first film, just because he did slice Danny Glover's throat. So he attempted to kill someone, but he failed to do it. But afterwards, they kind of like went in a different approach with it, and like, you know, they just, I don't know, they started glorifying the kills more than they did focusing on the story, and I kind of lost it. You know, you're basically, after the second one, you're just watching it for the kills. But the first one was very good, had a good twist, and that's one thing that horror films need, is a good twist at the end. Because if it has a good twist and a great climax, you've won over horror fans. They're going to come back and watch it and buy every edition of it that comes out. So yeah, so Saw is another example of survival horror type. You got Hostel as well. I'm not a big fan of Hostel, but yeah, you got Hostel out there. Another one you have is the Belko Experiment. It's not a straight up horror movie, but it is like an action. What would you do in the fight for survival, like a battle royale type film? It's bloody, but if you put yourself in this scenario, it is horror. It's definitely got some shades of horror in this movie. So Belko Experiment is a pretty fun ride as well. There's a few things in there that I would have cut out that was kind of cheesy, but overall, it's very fun. One of the greatest movies of all time, Jaws. Steven Spielberg's Jaws. You can say what you want about this movie. It has adventure, it has action, it has horror, it has comedy, great characters. It's just a good movie, and it still holds up to today. And look at the opening scene of this movie, where the girl is swimming out in the ocean, and it's dark, and then you see her just getting dragged back and forth in the water, and it's terrifying. It's scary. And you know, with this movie, which you know it's a shark, but a lot of times a good horror movie doesn't even show its villain until halfway through the movie, or almost to the end, because it kind of leaves it to your imagination, to your mind. You come up with your own creative monster in your mind until you get to it. And sometimes when we make it to the monster, it comes less effective and it pisses us off, or it just it hits it right on the point. Prime example, Jeepers Creepers. I love the first Jeepers Creepers all the way up until I saw the creature all the way to full form. I was like, oh, now I don't care about this movie. But the first half of the first film I really enjoyed. I wish they would have kept it more on that aspect, but yeah, I didn't really care for the sequels, not even the second one. But yeah, sense of adventure, great film. Got to see it if you haven't. I don't know who hasn't seen Jaws. Another one is, let's go into horror sci-fi. You got Predator. It's action as well. It's got some adventure. It's got some badass moments. And, you know, I know we're getting a sequel to Predator, or another entry to Predator later on this year. They're doing some reshoots right now for the climax. They're reshooting like 90% of the climax. And I heard that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the area, so they're assuming that he might have a cameo in the new Predator film. That would be awesome. But yeah, I mean, you look at this situation, how are you going to survive? I mean, it looks like Arnold's the only one that could, right? But yeah, Predator is a good example. Another one, Alien. The first Alien film is a straight up horror movie. It has some great effective jump scares, some claustrophobic moments. You're stuck in space. Some very gruesome type kills with the alien popping out of his stomach. It's kind of scary. when you think about it. And the later sequels with James Cameron making the second one and everything is just, you know, it goes into more of an action realm, but it still has shades of horror. But it's fun. It's adventure. It's sci-fi. It's action. It's fun. Let's talk about one of my favorite movies of all time by John Carpenter, The Thing. This is another shade of sci-fi horror action. I mean, you just have a really, really creative mind. The kills are great. The special effects for its time is great. It still kind of holds up to today. But you're on this ride with Kurt Russell all the way through it, and it's got this sense of mystery of like who is the thing and who's not. And I love that about films. I love a good whodunit, especially when they're done right. And you got good characters and everything. Especially like slasher whodunits. Those are great too. But like, yeah, The Thing does it right. This is probably John Carpenter's masterpiece, right behind Halloween. Or actually, I think I would prefer. I would say this is John Carpenter's best film over Halloween. I love Halloween. I'm not taking anything away from the franchise. I think it's great for what it does and everything. But I have to pick The Thing if we're talking about John Carpenter films. But yeah, very, very fun, very isolated. What would you do in this scenario? How would you get out? That type of feel. So yeah, The Thing is amazing. It's got a little bit of everything except comedy. I don't think it has much comedy. Another thing another film that is similar is The Faculty. This is one of my really guilty pleasures. I don't think this movie gets enough recognition that it deserves. This is in the era of the 90s horror with Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, films like that. And this film is amazing. It's a very easy watch. Great characters, great actors. Everyone really kills it in this. It has some comedy. It's got some action. It's got some horror. It's got some a little bit of everything. I just really enjoy it. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's well made. Robert Rodriguez made this with Kevin Williamson writing it, and also Robert Rodriguez worked on From Dusk Till Dawn. Both of these films are really fun to watch. That's all I can say. And it has shades of horror. Pretty much all horror films, but you could say they're action, sci-fi. This one's vampires, this one's aliens, but you know, obviously Quentin Tarantino helped make this, but it's just, you know, the first half was like a crime film, second half is like a horror action with vampires at the strip club. It's just a fun action movie. It's just a good time. So these are prime examples of different shades of horror. One film that is a great horror film, but I can't watch it over and over. There are these certain horror movies that are a great horror film. They're great masterpieces. They work very well. They're very well constructed. But it's not something that you would want to watch over and over and over. And one of my examples is the Exorcist. I love The Exorcist. I think it's a great movie. But some of that stuff's like you know, some people think it's real, some people don't. It's a great film, but it's not one of those horror movies I could just pop in and watch anytime. It's not something I would want to watch every time. It's just, you know, it's still terrifying. Some of those scenes are still terrifying to today and really disturb some viewers. I can handle it better than most, but it's still just not a movie that I would want to watch over and over and over. It's not my first pick, but it is a very well made film and a very effective horror film. Next, we're going to get into horror comedy. I mean, look at, you know, Tremors. Especially the first Tremors. I actually enjoyed the second one as well, but the first Tremors, it's fun. It's got adventure. It's got comedy. It's got horror. It's got adventure. It's got action. It's witty. It's pretty much self-aware. But this is a prime example of a good horror comedy. Slither with James Gunn, that's another one. I really think that like if you make a horror comedy, you got to make it right, because if it fails in either or, if it fails as a horror film or if it fails as a comedy, your movie's going to fail. If it has to succeed in one or the other. It has to succeed as a horror film or a comedy. If it fails in both, then the movie's no good. I can't recommend it. It needs to really succeed in both for it to be a well effective horror comedy. You got Evil Dead 2. You got Army of Darkness. You got Ash vs. Evil Dead on Stars. I mean, those are all prime examples of good horror comedy. Just good, fun action, blood and guts, and just witty humor. And that's, I mean, and then that's all, that's all you're coming for. You're coming for the guilty pleasure. That's it. Then you got Cabin in the Woods. It's a horror comedy, and it kind of was one of the better horror films that came out in a while, and I really loved what they did with Cabin in the Woods. I thought I like that lenticular. It's pretty badass. But anyways, it was fun. It was a fun, you put yourself in these scenarios and you kind of have fun with it. You get real creative. This movie was really real creative, and actually thinking about it, I kind of want to watch it right now, but probably won't ever get a sequel to that. Next we're going to go into, well, let me say this, Krampus, the film that came out a few years ago. I can't remember, it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I really think that failed as a horror comedy. It wasn't scary and it wasn't funny. I thought it failed on both of those. It did have some like Home Alone aspects, some Gremlins aspect, kind of like that, but I felt like it lost its way halfway through it, and overall it just didn't work. Didn't work for me. Something like that would be on Netflix today. But next is a film I have to talk about, is the whole franchise, Scream. This is a special place in my heart. Some people love Scream, some people hate it. I'm on the end of loving it. I think it's a love letter to horror fans. I think it's amazing. I think that it's not. I know that they get goofier as they go, but the first film was like very. It was very surprising. Like you never seen something done like this before, and it was just very, very well made. Honestly, I like every entry in this franchise. I just love the first one best, and I wish that opening scene with Casey Becker, Drew Barrymore, I wish they kept that tone all the way through. But you didn't know who the killer was, and you also kind of liked one of the killers at least, and it kind of surprised you. I like a good whodunit, so especially when they're done right like this one. Okay, so now I want to get down to like the creative kills. That's another reason why people watch horror films, is like the creative kills. And one of the best franchises for creative kills, besides the Final Destination films for destruction and freak accidents, is when it comes to slashers, it's Friday the 13th. I mean, that's mainly what you come to this franchise for. I'm not the biggest fan of the franchise, but Jason Voorhees, the killer, is amazing. He's an unstoppable force of nature. He's like the Terminator, but he's taken out bad characters that you don't get behind. The only character I really remember from the franchise is Tommy Jarvis. Everybody else is expendable. I mean, you're just looking at these really dumb characters get butchered all the way through this film, and you're just looking for the most creative kills. And it rides that line of horror comedy, but the comedy really just doesn't hit for me. Not the biggest fan of Friday the 13th, but I do appreciate it for what it is. It is a staple in horror films. I do like the remake, even though there are things about the remake it was lacking, but that was probably one of the better entries of the Friday the 13th films. But when it comes to Friday the 13th, I'm always like, I'm going to binge watch the Friday the 13th films, and I always go to my shelf and I'm always like, oh, I'm about to grab this. But then I always tend to pick up a better franchise, which is Halloween. I can pretend it's Halloween instead of Friday the 13th. It's a more grounded horror franchise because it's almost realistic in a way. There's not really too much supernatural going on with Michael Myers. It's more of a it's more of a suspense, a cat and mouse feel to it. The only thing that was supernatural was probably in the sixth one, Halloween 666, with the Thorn cult, which I can look past. I can get over that. It is one of the better sequels, but I'm not really behind that whole idea about Michael being controlled. You can't control Michael, but it goes in that same category as Terminator. He's an unstoppable force of nature, and he has no remorse. He has no feelings. This is just a little bit less cheesy than the Friday the 13th franchise, but it's very fun. Very, very one of the. I love this set, and I love everything about this franchise. The third one doesn't have Michael in it, but it's still a good film for what it is. But I think the original Halloween was supposed to be like the babysitter murders or something like that. But yeah, that's basically the reason why you get more behind Halloween, is because you get behind Jamie Lee Curtis's character and Dr. Loomis. You care about these characters. You want to see how they're going to overcome the situation. You're on this ride with the protagonist, and how are they going to defeat Michael? How are they going to get out? And that's basically it. And the kills aren't as creative as Friday the 13th or some slashers, because they're more serious, they're more grounded, they're more just like stabbed with a knife. It feels more realistic the way it's executed. That's why I think that Halloween is a better franchise overall. So yeah, that's basically my take on why I love horror films. I know this was a little bit of a lengthy video, but I kind of wanted to break it down in different sections and pull some stuff off the shelves and show you reasonings why that sci-fi horror. There's action horror, there's horror comedy, there's slashers, there's vampires, there's aliens, you go on and on and on, and you can find some type of enjoyment in it. It's just like any other kind of fantasy film. You watch action movies, people are getting killed left and right, but you want to see these bad people get killed and the good guy walk away with the girl and save the day. And same thing with horror. It gives you just this adrenaline rush, and if it's a good idea and a good horror icon, your imagination just starts rolling with it, and you just put yourself in this situation and you just go on this roller coaster ride. And that's the basics of why I love horror films. I've always been a horror fan ever since I was a little bitty, and I first caught Freddy Krueger, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 on TV. And I don't know how I caught it. I was really young. I can't remember how young I was, but I remember it was the first time I saw Freddy, and I was instantly hooked. I remember it was the scene of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, where Kincaid pushes the car on Freddy, and he's like, "Take that, motherfucker!" Like that right there. Like, I was too young to see that, but it just, like, I don't know. It stuck with me. I don't know. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you liked the intro. But yeah, I hope everybody has a great Friday the 13th. And make a video. Give your response of why you love horror films. And comment below and we can have a discussion. Alright guys. Happy Friday the 13th. Peace.